Hello, and today we're going to be reviewing the Ryobi RYI150BG 18-volt power source, aka a battery inverter. So let's get started. And starting off at the bottom of the tool, we have the 18-volt battery slot, which will accept any of Ryobi's 18-volt batteries. I really would only use 3 amp-hour batteries or higher with this particular tool, simply because anything underneath that is going to give you a very short run time, and will probably only be super useful for the USBs. But overall, the battery slot is nice and secure, and I've never had an issue with a battery falling out, so I think the battery slot is good on this particular tool. So it gets a pass. And moving upward, we have the grip. Now, the grip was an interesting choice. I personally would have went with the handle, but the grip works, and it actually does its job just fine. It has a nice rubberized texture to it that's very similar to what you'd find on all the other Ryobi tools, and overall, it is secure to hold. So it does its job just fine, but like I said, I personally would have preferred a handle. And moving around to the back of the tool, we have a strap point. And that's really all there is to say about it. It's a place where you can attach a power tool strap. It would have been nice if there had been some sort of a belt clip system, but I'm not really sure how you would implement that. But if they had been able to do that, that would have made this far more of an interesting tool for many reasons. But like I said, the only place that you can attach any sort of a strap or other alternative carrying means would be the strap point. Okay, moving around to the front of the tool, we have the AC outlet. Now, the AC outlet has a maximum of 150 watts running continuously, which isn't a whole lot, but there's still quite a few things that you can do with that much power, like running a small laptop computer, running a really crappy hot glue gun if you don't have the much better Ryobi cordless one, running a soldering device, running a Dremel or other small rotary tool, as well as shop lights, work lights, and fans, and many other things that I didn't mention. So overall, 150 watts you can still do a lot with, so I would definitely consider this to be a nice feature of this tool. There is a little bit of a con with the AC outlet, and that is that it's a modified sine wave inverter, so it's not a pure sine wave, meaning that your battery life is not going to be as good as is if it was a pure sine wave, and if you're dealing with a more sensitive electronic which is prone to interference from a modified sine wave, you're definitely going to be running into issues since it's not a pure. So that is definitely a con with this tool. Moving upward, we have the 2 USB ports at 2.4 amps. Unfortunately, it is a shared 2.4 amps, so you're going to be limited on how fast you can charge a device. So that's just something else to be aware of. It's not as big of a con, but it is still a little bit of a negative. So moving on. And moving upward, we have an LED light. Now, the LED light on this is more powerful than what you'd find on a drill or impact driver, but it's not going to be as good as a dedicated flashlight or other work light. It comes in handy if you're working in a tight space or if you're in an emergency situation. So overall, the LED light does its job pretty well, and it's actually a really nice feature to have on this tool, considering that, well, I think a lot of manufacturers probably wouldn't actually take the effort of putting a light on in this sort of a tool. So I definitely consider this to be a pro. And moving to the top of the tool, we have the switch for turning the LED light on and off. When the power tool is turned off, the switch will not work, but once you turn the inverter part on, then the light switch will work. It's a single operation switch. There's no high, medium, or low. It's just one brightness, but it does its job, and it does its job just fine, so it gets a pass. And last but not least, we have the on and off switch. You press it once to turn on, and the light will briefly turn red, and then once it's ready to power the device, it'll turn green. Now, to turn it off, you just press the switch again, and the device will turn off. I'm not really sure how you reset it since I've never had to do that. My guess it would be that you have to press and hold. But overall, the switch works just fine, and it definitely does its job, so it gets a pass. Now, weight-wise, the tool weighs 247 grams, or a little over half a pound. So that's a fairly light tool. And with a 4 amp hour battery, it'll weigh 966 grams, or 2.1 pounds. Now, price-wise, I think it's a little expensive. I really think $70 is too expensive considering it's not a pure sine wave. And I really think in the $50 to $60 range would be more suited. But it's up to you and how useful this would be to yourself. I really think it's a useful tool, and I have one myself. So, obviously, I didn't think it was super overpriced. But there is an alternative that is cheaper. The alternative is $50, and it's only 120 watts, 30 less watts. But it also can be powered via a 12-volt car adapter, so that's kind of cool. But the reviews on it are mixed, so you'll have to proceed at your own risk. Or until I decide to buy it, whichever one comes first. Okay, let's go through the pros and cons real quick. And the first pro would be that it's small. It's a nice lightweight tool which is small and easy to pack away in a traveling bag or inside a toolbox, so definitely a pro. LED light. Now the LED light isn't really all that powerful, but it is useful in tight spaces or in an emergency situation, so I would definitely consider it to be a pro. 2 USB ports. Overall, I'm really glad they decided to go with 2 USB ports and not just one. One port, it would have been fine, I guess, but having 2 is definitely way more useful and will definitely open up more possibilities for when you're on the go and needing to charge things. So definitely a pro. 150 watts. Now 150 watts isn't a whole lot, but there's plenty of smaller tools that you can plug into this and operate. So overall, I would definitely consider this to be a pro. Grip. Overall, I really am glad they decided to give this a grip and not just have it to be some smooth plastic design. So overall, this is definitely a pro. 18 volt. 18-volt power tool batteries can come in handy in all sorts of situations, from lighting to drilling to sawing, but this tool will definitely open up a whole new world of possibilities for anybody who is needing an AC outlet in a remote area or in an emergency situation. So overall, I would definitely consider this to be a super useful tool to have around. And the first meh would be the 2.4 shared USB outlets. I really would prefer 2 independent outlets that were both 2.4 amps. But we didn't get that, and we got the shared design. So it's not really that big of a con, but it's not really that big of a pro. It's just kind of meh. And the first con would be the modified sine wave. I really think at this price point, you really should have been getting a pure sine wave, and they definitely could have done it at this price point. So overall, I am a little bit disappointed that it's a modified sine wave, simply because you'll have a decreased runtime, and it's going to interfere with more sensitive electronics. And the last con would be the price. Now, overall, the price is a little bit high in my opinion. I think if it had been that pure sine wave, it would have been worth what they're asking. But as it stands right now, being modified sine wave, I think $70 is too expensive. But then again, it's really up to you and how useful you might find this tool. I personally find it super useful, and so I was willing to pay that price. But like I said, I still think it's a little bit overpriced. And that is it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular tool. Overall, this particular tool or adapter is very useful, and it comes in handy in a lot of different situations, whether it be an emergency or working in a remote location where you don't have a power outlet and you need to be running some smaller power tools like Dremels or soldering guns. I think this is a super useful tool to have around, and it definitely is a highly recommendable tool, even if it is a little bit overpriced. I just think that there's so many different situations that it can be of use in that it really is worth having around, especially if you have quite a few of the 18-volt batteries from Ryobi. So it definitely comes recommended, as long as you're willing to pay that price. And that is it for today's video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. God bless.